2311 Racing is among the teams that is trying to potentially pick up Kyle Busch for the 2023 season, and multiple team owners are trying to acquire a charter, including Dale Earnhardt Jr. What's going on, guys? This is Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go to jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kimi Räikkönen's 2022 Recogni LQ scheme we're going to see this weekend at Watkins Glen. Of course, it'll be Kimi Räikkönen's first ever NASCAR Cup Series race. This scheme looks really awesome, in my opinion. I love the colors on it. I think the yellow number, the yellow gold number, I think works really well in this scheme. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend here at Watkins Glen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Todd Gilliland's 2022 Entrepreneurs Organization of South Florida scheme they're going to see in a couple weeks at Homestead Miami Speedway. Honestly, really cool to see that he's got a new sponsor willing to work with him. I think the paint scheme looks really solid. Hopefully, Todd Gilliland will have a good run in this car here when we go to Homestead. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2022 Sugarlands/Ballpark scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Watkins Glen. Pretty cool to see that Sugarlands Distillery Shires is basically stepping up to sponsor Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I think that's amazing to see. I think this scheme looks pretty decent in my opinion, and hopefully Stenhouse will have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2022 Summer for Heroes scheme that I believe we're going to be seeing this weekend at Watkins Glen. Pretty cool to see Summer for Heroes is sponsoring Josh Berry. I think the paint scheme looks pretty decent in my opinion, and hopefully Josh Berry will have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2022 KCMG scheme we're going to see this weekend at Watkins Glen. I love the blue and the white colors. Everything on this works really well. I think it mismatches this really well, and it looks really good in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Andy Lally 2022 Third Side Coaching scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend here at Watkins Glen. Pretty good looking scheme, in my opinion. It's not perfect. I wish the colors were a little bit better, but I think it works perfectly. It looks decent. Hopefully he'll have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Stan & Bear's 2022 Horseheads Brewing scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Watkins Glen. Decent looking scheme, in my opinion. Really awesome to see Stan Barrett's basically coming back and sponsoring and coming back to race. It's been a few years since Stan Barrett's race. I think the last time he tried to race was 2018. Happy to see him back in the sport and hopefully have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Seven Parsons' 2022 Kelly Mitsubishi scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Watkins Glen. Love the colors on this. Love the black touch of the number. I think it looks really good. And happy to see Seven Parsons is back in the Xfinity Series this weekend at Watkins Glen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Spencer Boyd's 2022 Alabama Roofing Professionals scheme they're going to be seeing later this year at Talladega Super Speedway. This is very similar to the one he ran in 2019, of course, when he got his first career Camping World Truck Series victory. He'll be hoping to get that second victory. I think the paint scheme looks pretty solid, in my opinion. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2022 Princess Cruises scheme we'll be seeing this weekend at Watkins Glen and later this year at Homestead Miami Speedway. I believe this is the first time that a cruise company is sponsoring a NASCAR Cup Series car. You can all fact check me on that, but I think this is the first time. I think the paint scheme is really cool in my opinion. Awesome to see that Daniel Suarez has a new sponsor for this weekend, and good to see that we're going to be seeing a new sponsor for Daniel Suarez. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Watkins Glen for the Xfinity Series as they have a title sponsor for the race. And it's going to be called for this weekend the Sunoco Go Rewards 200. This is basically a last-minute sponsor. They have been really trying to get sponsorship for the Watkins Glen race because remember, this weekend is an NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Watkins Glen, which is only 3 or 4 days away from now. So they were looking to try to have a sponsor in funding, and they probably were wanting something bigger. But it's good to see the Sunoco Go Rewards is going to sponsor this weekend. Happy to see that they for sure will be sponsored this weekend. I think it's good to hear, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Amber Slagle. As Amber Slagle is going to be making her ARCA Sheep Showdown debut later this year on August 28th, so in 2 weeks from now, at the Milwaukee Mile. Amber Slagle has been racing in the ARCA West Series, but also racing late models for a very long time. She's been trying for many years to get an opportunity to race, so it's good to see that she's getting an opportunity to make that debut, and hopefully she'll have a good run in the 24 car. Hopefully she'll have a good run in the car. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Auto Club Speedway. As we've got a little more of an update in regards to Auto Club Speedway. Jeff Gluck posted a tweet a couple days ago. In fact, he posted it yesterday showing that they are continuing to move grandstands. Remember, Auto Club Speedway is currently being planned to be turned into a short track starting in 2024. The plan is to have one final race on the regular track in 2023 and then convert to the short track in 2024. Honestly, I think it's good to see that they are. I mean, am I a big fan of the short track move? No, but I understand what they're doing. And it's, again, they still have to get approved. It's unclear when it's going to happen, but they're saying currently right now the plan is to have the short track project done by 2024. So hoping to have that project done very, very soon and in the near future and have it ready for 2024 when the Cup Series goes there on the short track. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about F1 Las Vegas. Now, Adam Stern put out a tweet earlier this evening, and he shows, and according to him, he says MGM is planning to buy $20 to $25 million worth of F1 tickets so that it can create hotel and event packages for next year's races. Some of these hotel packages are expected to be over $100,000. That is a lot of money, and that is absolutely insane. Don't get me wrong, Formula 1 is more expensive than NASCAR. It's always been more expensive than NASCAR. But you're telling me you're trying to create a bunch of U.S. fans. And they really should know at this point and stop being arrogant. They should be at least cheapening the prices just a little bit. I think some of the prices are ridiculous in Formula 1, and this is insanity to me. $100,000 ticket packages for the whole entire weekend. A lot of people are not going to be able to afford that. The only people that are really going to be able to afford that are people that have millions of dollars. So you're going to get really, really bad attendance. You're probably not going to get the best attendance you want. I could be wrong on that, but they're not going to get the attendance they want, and people aren't going to show up because it's going to cost them the same amount of money to get tickets in these suites. Again, it's supposed to be expensive. It's the first race in Vegas, but still, that's the same amount of money, and it's going to cost way too much money, in my honest opinion, for that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about high limit racing. Now, tonight was basically the debut of High Limit Racing. They'll be having a full season starting in 2023, but tonight they're only doing one race, and it was this evening. And Buddy Kofoid ended up winning the season opener, or the series opener. Kyle Larson had one of the fastest cars earlier, was running third at the time, but he basically had a flat tire. There was other drivers like Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Alex Bowman, both those guys also won heats, and Kyle Larson also won his heat as well. But Buddy Kofoid, at the end of the day, went on to go and take the checker flag and go to victory. Happy to see Buddy Kofoid win. Buddy Kofoid is definitely one of the biggest drivers on the uprising. He's going to be also making his ARCA debut this weekend at the Springfield Mile, which I think that's going to be really fun to watch for sure. Really happy to see High Limit succeed. I think his series is going to have so much potential to succeed long term, and I think it will do a really good job at that, in my opinion. I think it's going to be very, very successful for the series, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the R&D from Richmond. As, of course, after every single Cup Series race, generally some cars end up getting sent to the R&D Center. This past weekend, Chris Buescher and Bubba Wallace's cars were sent to the R&D Center, and we were waiting on if we were going to get penalties from that or not. Well, there's no penalties from the R&D Center. Both Chris Buescher and Bubba Wallace passed in the R&D Center, and there's no issues from it. The only person that got a penalty was Danny Stockman for $2,500 for basically a fine for having a lug nut on the car. But basically, both their cars got through R&D. Lucky for both those guys, it looks like their cars were good to go, and that's from the R&D Center. Good to see that no one got a penalty. I think that's really good to see, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Tilley. As Kyle Tilley is going to drive a 78 for Live Fast Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. I believe this will be Kyle Tilley's first or second start of the 2022 season. He's not ran so far this year. It's been anticipated that he was going to run a few races in this car. I'm not sure how Kyle Tilley is going to do this weekend. Generally, he's struggled when he's been in the Cup cars, but hopefully Kyle Tilley can have a good run in the 78 car. Hope he can do well and get this car a top 30 finish, because I think that's the goal for Kyle Tilley this weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Austin Wayne Self. As Austin Wayne Self is going to be making his Xfinity Series debut at Watkins Glen this weekend, driving the number 32 for AM Racing. Of course, this car is going to have to make it on owner's points and make it to the show on speed, as this car has no owner's points to back it up. The big reason why he's in this car is because he's basically married to Jordan Anderson's sister, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a big reason why he's in the car, and he's had a pretty big relationship and family relationship with the company. I think it's good to see Austin himself making his debut. It's been anticipated he was probably going to make a debut at some point. They're trying to get that 32 car full-time. Hopefully Austin himself can do a good job in this car and make the field this weekend for AM Racing. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brandon Brown. As Brandon Brown is going to drive the 5 for Busch To Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. Of course, Brandon Brown will not be driving his car for next night of 12 races. He's only going to be running 3 more races with the Brandonville Motorsports organization. So this will be 4 out of the last 12 races for sure. We know he's going to run. I think Brandon will make the field. The 5 car has a lot of owners' points back in it. Brandon's a very talented driver. I think he'll be able to get it done, and I think he's going to have a shot to make the field, in my honest opinion. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Scott Heckert. As Scott Heckert is going to drive a 78 for Busch To Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. This will be Scott Heckert's second or third start of the 2022 season. And I expect that Scott Heckert is going to be someone that's going to surprise a lot of people this weekend. Scott Heckert, of course, has won some America East races at Watkins Glen on road courses as well. And he's a driver I think will contend for top 10 and top 15. I think his car's got the pace and speed to get it done. And I think that he'll have a shot to get a top 10 and top 15 this weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Brad Perez. As Brad Perez will once again be trying to make his Xfinity Series debut and be driving a 35 for Emerald Gate Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. This will be his second opportunity to try to make his debut. He actually barely missed his debut in the Xfinity Series earlier this year at Indianapolis Road Course. And now he'll be trying once again to make his debut. If his car doesn't have any mechanical problems or mechanical failures, I think Brad Perez has much of a shot as a lot of other people do to make the field. Hope Brad Perez can make the field as I think he's a really talented driver. He absolutely deserves an opportunity, and I think he definitely has a good shot to make the field. Hopefully, he gets that opportunity to make the field. I think he does have a pretty good shot, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spencer Pampelli. As Spencer Pampelli is going to be driving a 6 for JD Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. Spencer Pampelli's driven a 6 car a couple times in the last few years. Of course, he's been racing IMSA for a very, very long time. Has a lot of experience in that series. But when he's been in NASCAR, he's really, really struggled. But I think this time around he's going to have a good run. I really do think he does. Of course, he'll have to qualify his way in since 6 car is not in the greatest position at owner's points. But I think that Spencer Pampelli's got a really good shot to make the field. Hopefully Spencer will have a good enough opportunity to make the field in the 6 car this weekend at Watkins Glen. Hopefully he's able to make the field. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cole Custer. As Cole Custer is going to drive a 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen. This will be Cole Custer's 4th or 5th start so far in 2022. And Cole Custer, I think, is going to have a shot to win because every time he's been in the 07 car outside of Pocono, he's been a contender. Nearly won earlier at Sarasota, won at Auto Club earlier this year, had good speed at other racetracks this year, and I think that Cole Custer will be definitely a threat to win this weekend in the 07 car. I think this is potentially where he could be driving full-time next year if things do happen, but I think that Cole Custer is going to have a really good shot to win this weekend at Watkins Glen, but it's a very tough field, a very tight field, and a lot of talent in the field this weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain. As Ross Chastain is going to drive the 92 for DGM Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen. This will be Ross Chastain's 2nd or 3rd start so far of the 2022 season in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And he's come close to winning Xfinity multiple times so far. I think Ross will be really, really quick, have a lot of pace and speed, and I expect the 92 car to be a contender for the pole. I think he will make the final round shootout, and I think he's going to have a good shot at getting the pole in this car. Just happy to see Ross is in Xfinity once again. Hopefully, he'll have a good shot and be able to have a good run this weekend at Watkins Glen. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Team Haysbert. As Team Haysbert is going to be fielding 2 cars this weekend at Watkins Glen. Danny Kvyat will be making his 2nd start this weekend in the Cup Series in the number 26 car once again. This will be his 2nd start in the Cup Series. And Larice Hasemans will drive the 27 this weekend. This will be Larice's 3rd start in Cup, and this will be Danny Kvyat's 2nd career start. Both cars might be Fords. I'm not entirely sure. I know that the 2017 is. It's unclear if the 2016 is a Ford or it's going to be a Toyota. Hopefully things go well for both of them this weekend. I think Danny Kvyat being in Cup is just really, really awesome to see. And seeing an international presence is great to see. Hopefully both these guys will have a good run in the Cup Series this weekend at Watkins Glen. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode. And speaking of which, let's talk about international presence for this weekend. So for this weekend, we're going to have 7 countries represented in the Cup Series field at Watkins Glen. That is a new record for the Cup Series in the history of the series. That is a record. So there's 7 countries. What are the countries? Well, the United States with a majority of drivers. You've got Daniel Suarez, who's from Mexico. Mike Rockefeller, who is from Germany. You have Loris Hasemans, who is from the Netherlands. You have Kimi Räikkönen, who is from Finland. You have Kyle Tilley, who is from basically Britain and the UK. And then you have Danny Kvyat, who is from Russia. Just seeing so much international presence and a lot of diversity in the field as well. I think it's an amazing thing to see. That's what really is going to make the sport really good, is seeing all the diversity and different backgrounds of drivers and so many champions from different sports. You've got Formula One champions like Kimi Räikkönen. You've got DTM champions like Mike Rockefeller. You've got Rolex 24 champions, Indy 500 champions racing in this event. And I think this event is going to be massive for TV viewership. I'm really excited for this race for sure. It's just so incredible and amazing to see all the international presence that is going to be at the track this weekend. I think that's really exciting, and I'm excited to see all the international presence this weekend at Watkins Glen. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Christian Lundgaard. As Christian Lundgaard has officially signed a contract extension, a multi-year contract extension with Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. Christian Lundgaard had basically already had a contract through 2023, but now will be expanding past 2023 and will continue driving for many years to come. Why is Lundgaard getting extended? Well, Christian Lundgaard has been performing extremely well over the last few weeks. The last 2 races especially, he's been contending for top 5s and top 10s, and nearly won his first career IndyCar race a couple weeks ago at the Indianapolis Road Course. And I think that's why they're re-signing him. I think they see so much potential in Christian, and he's really starting to show what he is capable of. I think going into 2023, I think he'll be more of a contender. Do I think he's going to contend for a championship next year? No, I don't think Rahal's been up to par to go for a championship, but I think that Christian's going to be really, really good for this series. I think he's someone that really deserves this opportunity to continue driving for the team. I think he'll do really, really well for the company, really, really well for the branding, and I'm excited to see that he will continue driving for Rahal. He deserves, in my opinion. He's made the 30 car really, really fast, got good sponsorship, good funding behind him, and I think he will continue to only make the team stronger and make them better, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about viewership from this past weekend and viewership so far for NBC. So for the Cup Series race in Richmond, the Richmond race had 2.4232 million viewers. That is up around 25% from the race last year, which had 1.8 million viewers, but it needs to be noted that that was on a Saturday. Still, that is the 5th consecutive race, or 5th or 6th straight consecutive race that has been up so far for USA Network and or NBC as well. It also needs to be noted that through the first 8 races on NBC's calendar, the viewership has been up on average 4%. And if you take away what happened at Road America and what happened at the previous race before that, the ratings would have been a lot higher. This is really, really good to see ratings continue to get higher, and I think NASCAR's got a bright future. Why are people tuning in? Well, a lot of people know about USA. NBC has done a really good job promoting USA Network, which is why we've seen huge increases in TV ratings. And 2.4 million viewers, people watching Richmond, that's really good numbers in my opinion. But I think what's going on is that people are seeing the racing, and the racing generally this year has been really, really good. So people are tuning into the racing. They're tuning into it. A lot of good viewership. We're seeing huger numbers. We're seeing bigger numbers. And I think the next-gen car is only going to make the popularity of sport grow, in my opinion. And I think we're heading into a right direction and really in a good gateway to really be heading toward a really bright future for the sport as a whole. So I think this is absolutely amazing. Amazing for the sport for sure, that viewership continues to go up. I think that's big for the sport, and hopefully long-term it can continue to head toward its directions. I think the sport's got so much potential to continue to grow, and I think we're going to see a lot of great things come out of the future of NASCAR, because I think the ratings going up like this is great. Continue to promote, continue to try to grow different markets. We're getting close to schedule being released here, and I think it's cool to see the viewership continues to go up, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kimi Räikkönen. Now, Kimi Räikkönen has been in the news for the last couple of weeks, because we already know at this point that Kimi Räikkönen is making his NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend at Watkins Glen. Justin Marks was being interviewed by media members, including Bob Pockers, and he talked about how much preparation that Kimi Räikkönen has really done. Justin Marks has basically really high expectations for Kimi Räikkönen this weekend based on Räikkönen's preparation, asking a lot of questions, being involved, and trying to figure out what is going on. He also knows that he wants basically Kimi needs to know that Kimi needs to be realistic with his expectations, and Kimi's biggest thing is going to be how is he going to perform under race conditions. Kimi Räikkönen is someone I think is going to surprise a lot of people this weekend. I'll tell you why I think he's going to be a surprising underdog in this race. Kimi Räikkönen has gotten up to speed much quicker than a lot of drivers I've seen. And look who's won a lot of races here. Trackhouse Racing has won 2 road course races this year. Ross Chastain at Coda and Daniel Suarez at Sonoma. I think Kimi Räikkönen is going to have a really good chance to go out there and not win the race. I don't expect him to win. We've got drivers, not just Justin Marks, but drivers like Cole Custer and Chase Elliott have been really, really praising him. Chase Elliott thinks, in all honesty, I think he thinks that Kimi could get a top 20 or even a top 15 or even a top 10 this weekend. And Cole Custer thinks he also could get a top 10. I think this story around Kimi Räikkönen is such a big deal, and I think Kimi Räikkönen is not only going to surprise me, but I think it's going to surprise a lot of people as well. Where do I think he's going to finish? I think it for sure gets top 20 this weekend. I think it will get that, and I think there's a good chance also that Kimi Räikkönen could get a much higher finish than that. I think Kimi's going to definitely be a threat to be a contender in the race. I think it'll be a big surprise for sure, and I think a lot of people are going to be shocked to see that Kimi Räikkönen runs well, but I do believe that Kimi Räikkönen is going to have a really strong run this weekend with Trackhouse Racing, considering how fast Trackhouse has been on the road courses. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez and his comments around the Kyle Busch decision. Now, basically, the main thing in that article that Nate Ryan wrote was basically about how Daniel Suarez is close to signing an extension. He was asked about the situation around Kyle Busch, and Daniel Suarez says, in my opinion, JGR has not done a good job selling Kyle Busch. They have known that at the end of the year, M&M's is leaving for a long time, and they haven't been able to find anything. I find that very surprising. I'll absolutely 100% agree with Daniel Suarez on this. They knew about this months ago. This basically is not something that just came up with M&M's. We all know at this point that M&M's is leaving Joe Gibbs Racing at the conclusion of this year. A lot of big reason is, I think, to go to football and sponsor the companies and other basically sports as well. Daniel Suarez is really on point here. They had a lot of time. They knew way in advance that this was happening. I think they knew back in July or in August that this was going to be happening. So why were they not finding a sponsor for Kyle Busch? I just don't 100% understand it. And I agree with Suarez. And this comes from a guy who basically used to go work at Joe Gibbs Racing, used to drive for Joe Gibbs Racing, who brought sponsorship and funding. And honestly, I think Daniel Suarez is really taking the money to the bank at this point because he's being really successful with Trackhouse Racing. Meanwhile, he still got Joe Gibbs Racing. He's still trying to find a sponsor for Kyle Busch, and they're having problems trying to basically sign a sponsor for Kyle Busch. Now, that doesn't mean Kyle Busch is going to be out of the Cup Series, but I agree with Daniel Suarez. They need to figure out what's going on with Kyle Busch. They need to figure out what is going on and figure out a solution to the problem, because I do think it's a big problem that they've not been able to find a sponsor for Kyle Busch. I think it's a pretty big deal in my opinion, and they at some point are going to have to figure out something around Kyle Busch, because I think Daniel Suarez is really on point. Now, back to the Daniel Suarez contract talks. We already talked about this. Daniel Suarez is very close to signing a multi-year extension with Trackhouse Racing. That's probably going to be announced in the coming days, if not weeks. Well, next week's, couple weeks for sure. And not even the coming days. Probably in the next couple of weeks, we're going to hear about Daniel Suarez's contract extension. But I think Suarez is on point here. They need to find sponsorship and need to find funding for Kyle Busch here very, very soon and very, very quickly if they're going to want to keep Kyle Busch. Because we'll talk about why they need to figure it out here, because it's getting really ridiculous. They've not been able to find one. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ford numbers. Now, Ford numbers have been something that have been a major, major controversy really since the beginning of the season. Well, according to Adam Stern, they've actually been somewhat of a benefit for sponsorship. According to him, sponsors of NASCAR teams have received increased brand exposure from paint schemes this season due to a change that shifted the position of the number decals, per Nielsen analysis and interviews with industry executives. Honestly, this shouldn't surprise anybody. When you move the numbers a little bit forward, you see basically a little bit more of the branding. But also, some teams haven't done a really good job with the paint schemes, while others, like Trackhouse Racing, Heckert Motorsports, other teams have done a much better job when it comes to getting that brand exposure. And I'll be fair and honest when it comes to the Ford numbers. Before the season began, I was not a big fan of the Ford numbers, but as we got more paint schemes revealed and a lot of designers started working on these paint schemes, this honestly grew on me. they really grew on me basically what was going on with this. I think it's something that actually has benefited the sport a little bit and again, I think it actually really has an effect on the product. And let's be honest, racing on the track has generally been a lot better this year than the Gen 6 car. And they had to move the numbers forward because of the wheel wells and stuff. And it wouldn't have looked as great if it was center. But I also would love to see if for like throwback racing in the future, if they keep it center or let the teams basically decide. But like I said, I actually have not been against these forward numbers as much as I was at the beginning. And if they were banned near the back, that would have been terrible. But I think one thing I will say is that the forward numbers have actually benefited a little bit. I think they've worked. Now, I like to see statistical evidence showing if we see new sponsors come in, which, again, if you're a Kyle Busch fan, you're probably thinking this is really a BS report. But again, is this something from Adam Stern? He's basically just doing the reporting. And I get what Adam Stern is trying to say here. And I think a lot of teams and some of these owners really think that this is something that has benefited the sport. And it probably has benefited the sport. I would not be surprised if it really has. But I understand people's frustration with these comments. Some people probably think it's a lot of BS. But it's basically just showing more brand exposure. They're showing the sponsors out a little bit more. And some of them are sending you're able to see some of the companies more. And you're going to have to hear this from Nielsen Analytics. And you're going to hear this from other people as well. So it's not a big surprise that they're saying this. But if it is true that they're getting more brand exposure, it means that potentially we can get some new sponsors here in the near future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about charters. Now, last week on the channel, we talked about the charter system and how much charters are right now currently at this moment. Adam Stern put out a tweet basically on Friday, or actually Thursday, I believe. Charters right now are going for around $20 million, and the next charter is expected to be around $20 million at this moment. That has gone up exponentially from last year. Denny Hamlin basically bought up a charter for $13.5 million. Last year was around $11 to $12 million. Around April, it was $15 million, and it's jumped up significantly up to $20 million. Now, on the Door Bumper Clear podcast this past week, and I think I talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago, but on Door Bumper Clear podcast, when you're talking about this, basically, three owners came up in the episode. Matt Collick is one of them. Denny Hamlin is another one. And the other one, and the big key one, is Dale Jr. Those three are trying to acquire a charter. Now, let's talk about significance. Matt Collick, owner of Collick Racing. Collick Racing, I think, would love to expand to a three-car operation heading into 2023 or in the future. But again, they're going to need a charter. Denny Hamlin has said that they would love to also expand to another charter in 2023, but again, they need a charter. And Dale Jr. has basically said that the biggest thing holding him back is the charters, but he's trying to also acquire a charter. And there are more team owners outside of these three. I think there's 5 or 6 that are trying to currently acquire a charter at the moment. But what is the big thing that's really holding it up? The money. Right now, charters, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, charters are around $20 million, and who is going to sell them to these team owners? Well, you think about who could sell them. Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports, they have 2 charters currently at the moment. They've got Corey LaJoie in a 7, and that 77 car is a split car. In my opinion, that 77 car has just really not done nothing but being extremely slow, and it's one of the slowest cars every single week. Now, I will say the 77 car has been improving the last few weeks. They've been a little more consistent. They've been running in the top 25 a lot more consistently, and I think they're showing a lot more, but they don't get the same resources that Corey LaJoie gets. Would Spire be willing to sell a charter and give up one of their rides and maybe sell it to one of these team owners? That is a very big possibility. You also have other teams like Ricker Racing who could sell their charters, but does Ricker Racing want to keep 2 or keep 1 in? Because I think they would love to have Cody Ware stay full-time since Cody is son of Rick Ware. They probably do want to keep Cody Ware inside one of those cars. That's one thing I think that is going to happen. So, what needs to happen? Number one, there are benefits and negatives to the charter system. The big benefits is if you do sell your team, you get a lot of money back, and you don't just basically have an empty team. You basically get a lot of the assets back, you get a lot of money back, and you basically get a ton of money as well. Look at Derek Cope. Derek Cope is basically on a beach somewhere and basically racing in Trans Am from time to time, but he's basically most of the time on a beach somewhere with his wife. So that's something to think about too. So they could absolutely sell their team. Now, the big thing is, what could they do? Well, number one, they could add more charters. I think, honestly, NASCAR, with how many team owners are trying to get into the sport, I think they need to expand the charters. Now, I think those charters should be a little bit cheaper, but I think NASCAR, one thing they could do is expand from 36 to 40 numbers in the field. They can increase the field size up to 43 and give 4 more charters out. Therefore, Matt Collick, Denny Hamlin, Dale Jr., Trackhouse Racing, Nice Motorsports, they can go out there and buy a charter if they want to and get another charter. The other thing that they could do is enforce the bottom 3 rule. Now, what is the bottom 3 rule? So, quintessentially, there's the bottom 3 teams in the owner's points basically have 3 years to get above that top 3. If they're consistently below the top 3, they have to basically either sell their charter or consider selling their charter. And we haven't really seen NASCAR enforce this, but I think if you're going to have these teams come in, you're going to have to enforce this bottom 3 rule. It is a shame and it's going to cost a lot of money to get in the sport, but I think there are benefits to the charter. But again, the negatives is that, and one thing that needs to also happen too, in my opinion, is the price that basically enter these races. They need to basically increase how much they're getting. The teams, the open teams, are only getting 1% of the pie. They need to be getting 15 to 20%. They should be getting about a lot more money, and therefore you have more cars show up. Again, we're having the largest Cup Series field since Daytona 500 this weekend at Watkins Glen. And I just think that they need to find a way, in my opinion, to be able to increase how profit. If they're going to want to stay long term, you're going to have to basically find a way to increase. And I think the charters are going to get more expensive. Do not get me wrong. But they got to basically find a way to help with this charter system issue. But I think you've got guys like Dale Jr. trying to get a charter. Dale Jr. wants to go Cup Racing. Junior Motorsports wants to go Cup Racing. We know 2311 wants to expand. And we know College wants to expand. And other organizations are trying to buy charters as well. This is where we're going to be watching long term, and we'll wait to see what happens in regards to that. And now we're going to head into the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we've talked about Kyle Busch so many times on this channel, and we're talking about Kyle Busch once again. And the big reason is because there's a new team apparently that could be a factor into silly season. Now, we already know the 3 teams that are currently in the factor for Kyle Busch. Joe Gibbs Racing, who's trying to re-sign him. College Racing is the Chevy team, and Stewart-Haas Racing is the Ford team. Now, let's recap what's going on with Kyle Busch. So we already talked about this. M&M's is leaving Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of the season. It was announced in December that they would be leaving. A few months ago, it started becoming reported official as we all thought Kyle Busch would be coming back in 2023. They were basically sponsored for 1 year. It was reported that Kyle Busch only had a deal through 2022, and we're needing to find a sponsor. They actually had a sponsor for Kyle Busch for 2023 with Oracle, but Oracle basically dropped that sponsorship. And now Toyota is scrambling to get a sponsor. And we heard this past week that Joe Gibbs Racing may have stopped talking to Kyle Busch and basically may have be done talking with him, whether it's basically he has to now just sign a contract or they're done talking with him. And Stewart-Haas Racing and Kaulig have become front runners for this car. Now, there's another big thing is KBM. Kyle Busch says this decision he makes is going to basically have to do with KBM, and basically would love to retire with Brexton in the truck series and him sharing a truck in 2031. Brexton turned 16 years old, him sharing a majority of the year and going out and winning a truck series championship as well. Well, there's another team that has actually come into play for this, and this is 2311 Racing. According to the Teardown podcast that Jordan Bianchi and Jeff Gluck do on the Teardown podcast about 46 minutes into the podcast, Jordan Bianchi mentions that he says that 2311 Racing is a team to watch for a multitude of reasons. This actually kind of surprising, but there's a couple of big reasons why we could be looking at 2311 Racing. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier in this episode, Denny Hamlin is trying to acquire a charter and get a third charter for the organization. They're trying to expand for 2023, and they would love to expand, especially since maybe they have 3 cars, have Tyler Reddick go there. 2311 Racing expanding could free up some space for Kyle Busch. But another big thing that 2311 Racing can do, you have to look at Kurt Busch. Does Kurt Busch retire at the end of this year, retire earlier, or does he come back in 2023? Kyle Busch and Kurt Busch feel like they both think that Kurt will come back in 2022 and finish in 2023 as well, but it's unclear if that is going to happen. It is all going to come down to how the brain works and the mentality. We still have no clue right now if Kurt Busch has been cleared to race for this weekend. There may be a chance that Kurt Busch is out for the rest of the season. That's one thing we're not sure if he will, but I think there's a good chance he could be out. And another big thing to think about, too, is the Truck Series team. If you move Kyle Busch over to 2311 Racing in 2023, you can keep Kyle Busch at Toyota. You can help with Toyota pipelines. I think KBM is a big, important factor to that. And you can keep Kyle Busch there for a year or two. Another thing that could happen, and the theory I've had, is what if they move Kyle Busch to one of the 2311 Racing cars and put Ty Gibbs in his car for one season. They have Ty Gibbs in 18 for 1 year because I think they're going to have Ty Gibbs go to the 18. I really think that in 2023, regardless of what happens or not, we're going to see Ty Gibbs full-time in Cup at this point. I just see it happening at this point. And I think this could be a very big possibility. For 1 year, you have Ty Gibbs in 18 and Kyle Busch in a 2311 racing car. And then, after 2023, you can bring Kyle Busch back, Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024 to finish his career there. But what if this doesn't happen? Where does Kyle Busch go in 2023 if this does not become a team that becomes viable? Well, I think of the other two options. You think of Stewart-Haas Racing, and you think of Kaulig Racing. Kaulig Racing is a team that has been, the Chevy team has been in the conversations. We've heard that Matt Kaulig has not had any conversations with Kyle Busch. When you think of elevating teams, Kyle Busch is a driver that really could elevate an organization and really could elevate a team as well. And I think Kyle Busch will really benefit working with the team. And you could have a very good Chevy development program. Doran Van Befler mentioned that maybe GMS is maybe considering shutting down. There's talks maybe they could be shutting down at the end of the season. So you would lose that Chevy development program, and Chevy could pick up the pieces for KBM. The other team is Stewart-Haas Racing. And the big team that everyone's talking about is the 41 car. Now, the big reason we're mentioning the 41 car and not the 10 car is because the 10 car, Eric Almirola talked about this. He's talking about coming back, and there's a lot of parts and pieces that need to happen for him to return. But Eric Almirola's in conversations to return in 2023, and it's sounding more than likely that Eric Almirola is going to come back to Stewart-Haas Racing next year full time. So that translates into the 41 car. Cole Custer has not performed well. Let's be for real. Cole Custer's underperforming that car. He's only had 2 top 10s, and those 2 top 10s have come at tracks with chaos. At Atlanta, got a top 10 because he basically survived the big one and did not reckon the big one. The other race being, of course, when he drove, basically the other race being a couple weeks ago at the Indy Road Course, basically got top 10 because all the chaos in turn number 1. So really, he didn't get it on pure speed. Cole Custer struggled. And I think if you bring Kyle Busch in, and Kevin Harvick would love to have Kyle Busch in, if you bring Kyle Busch into this organization, I really believe that Stewart-Haas Racing is going to benefit. So I think this could be a really big beneficiary. I still think Stewart-Haas Racing is a candidate, the favorite for Kyle Busch to go to, but we go back to 2311 Racing. I think Jordan Bianchi's on point. We do need to watch 2311. I think they're an underdog and a team to watch for, and I think there's a good chance Kyle Busch does go to 2311 Racing next year. But this is something we'll be watching as we get closer to the end of the year, and we're getting into crunch time at this point. We're in the middle of August. We're getting close to the end of August. In fact, we're basically in the second half of August right now, and we're only a couple weekends from the playoffs starting, and Kyle Busch just got his first top 10 in 9 races. So he needs to hopefully have some good runs too. Hopefully that will help with the negotiations, but at some point, they're going to have to figure something out. But it doesn't seem like things are going well right now for Kyle Busch, and they do need to figure something out here very soon. So anyway, that is going to be for today's Lawn NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. As for me on Patreon as well. Let's go jump all over that and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think Kyle Busch can end up at 2311 Racing full time next year or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Dale Jr. and other team owners trying to buy up a charter? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we should have a silly season update on the channel. Unless we get something major in the industry, we'll have a silly season update. Friday could be also NASCAR news video. Saturday, I think I'm going to be doing a video basically on pole qualifying. I think that's going to be coming Saturday. There won't be an Xfinity Series race review for Watkins Glen. And then Sunday will be the Cup review from Watkins Glen. And then we've got other content on the way as well as we get closer. We've also got some stuff that might be on the way for you guys to announce here in the near future. Keep your notification tabs on. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.